On today's show, the Hawks get swept in a two-game series in Brooklyn with the offense falling off a cliff in the second half on this Saturday afternoon. We'll get into all of what transpired and much more, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1665 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday afternoon / evening here in early March. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day and check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. Check out Locked On Hawks on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Overcast and Pocket Cast. We're also on YouTube on the video side. And please check out the folks at Locked On Sports Atlanta for the postcast on this same channel for your audio-only listeners. And they're also on their own YouTube channel. And today's podcast will focus on what became a pretty rough loss for the Hawks on the road up in Brooklyn, 114-102 at the hands of the Nets. This is a rematch, of course, of the game on Tuesday, which lost by 27 points, and was a really bad performance on Thursday. And as I sort of laid out on the podcast on Thursday, even before the podcast on Thursday, this two-game series in Brooklyn was pretty impactful in the standings if you care about the play-in race, and I know a lot of fans do care about that. Essentially, the stakes for today's game alone was that if the Hawks won this game, they'd have been up 4 games against Brooklyn with 22 to play. That's a pretty massive advantage. And they would have tied the season series. Instead, they lose, and now they're only up by 2 games on Brooklyn, and the Nets have the season series. So if the Hawks and Nets were to tie, the advantage goes to Brooklyn. So all that said, they're basically only up by 1 game now on Brooklyn, and that is not where they wanted to be heading into this 2-game series. Also, this was the earliest game as far as like on the clock this season, is a 3 o'clock start up in Brooklyn. Lots to get to in this one. The Hawks led this game by as many as 13 points in the first half of this game. It kind of flattened out a little bit before halftime, still up by 2 at the break, and then the offense just fell off a cliff after halftime. They scored 18 points in the third quarter and then 22 in the fourth, and that was even probably a little bit charitable. So as we always do on the podcast, we'll kind of go big picture first, and then we'll dive in sort of the nuts and bolts. In the middle of the podcast, at the end of the show, what we do is go by sort of player by player and break down how everybody sort of fared on the floor in this game for the Hawks. But first, we have to start with the offense. And it was basically kind of a tale of two halves. The Hawks have been, at the very least, inconsistent recently on the offensive end of the floor, and that was personified in this game. They end up with a 107 offensive rating in this one, 102 points. Those are not good numbers against a pretty shaky Nets defense. Not terrible, but not good either. In the first half, it was actually quite strong. They scored more than 1.2 points per possession in the first half, and I even noted this during the game, that it was probably about as good as you could reasonably ask for with their current personnel before halftime. And then, of course, the second half was absolutely dire on offense. They had an 85 offensive rating in the second half of this game, in a game that was, again, pretty pivotal as far as big picture. You could argue, I'm not necessarily saying this for sure, you could argue this is the biggest game of the season as far as the play-in race is concerned at this late date, all that stuff. And the second half of this game was really woeful. They scored 40 points after halftime. And honestly, 8 of those points out of the 40 came in the final 2.5 minutes or so. And it was total garbage time by then. So essentially, it was even worse than the 40 points would have indicated. Here's a crazy number for you. They had 5 assists and 9 turnovers after halftime. They shot 31% from the field and 8% from 3 in the second half of this game, and kind of, all things put together, they actually shot the ball very poorly on the whole, 43% from the field and 32% from 3 in the game. They had 0 fast break points. It's actually hard to do that, and it wasn't because they just were emptying all these possessions. They didn't run very much, and when they did, it was very ineffective. And really, with this personnel they have right now, without Trey and without Okongwu, they kind of need to run in order to score more efficiently. And that was not the case in this game. They also missed 6 free throws. They weren't terrible at the line, but they weren't good either. Their one offensive area where they actually ended up being pretty good on the whole was the offensive glass in this game. They had 15 second chance points. It's actually about, above average, like top 5 in the league kind of number. But look, it was really unsightly in the second half. It wasn't just that the Hawks were bricking open shots. There were some of that, like in the NBA, if you score 40 points in a half and you have an 85 offensive rating, part of that is going to be that you just missed some open shots. That definitely happened. If you go play by play in the second half, watch the film back, there were some missed opportunities. Some makeable shots around the rim, makeable shots from three they didn't make. Still, though, the process was really not good. The shot quality was not good in the second half of this game. And really in the first half, after watching it again post-game, it was better than the first half process-wise for sure. But if anything, they were probably shooting above their heads a little bit in the first half of this game. And things definitely regressed in a hurry after halftime. So also, while we're here, I talked about this a lot on the podcast that was most recently posted on this feed on Thursday evening into Friday. The Hawks had a 104 offensive rating in the game on Thursday as well. And just to put it plainly, the Nets are below average defensively. So it's not like they were playing some gauntlet team. Like they weren't facing the Wolves in these two games. And they had a day in between with no travel to prepare. And in the first half, they had some wrinkles. I think this is a reasonably well-coached game. They had some issues in the second half for sure, but they had a game plan that was working. It's that, it's just not a good offensive team. I mean, I don't mean to be reductive. And if you listen to the podcast regularly, you will know this. But if you don't, I aim to be level-headed, and I'm not a too high or too low person. I like to provide the nuance and the context and kind of not react sharply to small sample size, especially 1 game, 2 game samples. And I'm not doing that here, but since Trae Young went down, that's 4 games. The Hawks have about a 110 offensive rating in those 4 games. That would be a bottom 5 mark in the league this season. Coming into that stretch, the Hawks had a 117.6 offensive rating for the season. That included some games without Trae, but all that stuff, that's their total offensive rating before Trae went down. They have not gotten to that number even once in 4 games. They've been below that number in all 4 individual games. And look, it's not going to be as bad as it was in the second half of this game on a regular basis. It was really awful in the second half of this game. No team is as bad as this, as bad as that sample size was on offense. But at the same time, it's not going to be as good as the first half was this afternoon, very much either with this current personnel. And really, I don't mean to be takey, and I'm not trying to be, but the current version of the Hawks without Trae, without Onyeka, who also is a big key. This is not just Trae. Onyeka is their best offensive center. That definitely unlocks a lot of different stuff for them. So without those 2 guys, there really is no reason, both logically, watching them all season long, watching them in the last 4 games, the numbers, all that put together, there's no really reason to believe they're going to be a good offensive team with their current personnel. Better than this, maybe, but not good. Not top half, not top 10, not top 5, where they've been at times this season. So they have to make up for that on defense. And in the first 2 games that they won without Trae, it were, as I said on the podcast, it was nice. It was very obviously led by the defense. And yes, unsustainable shooting from opponents, etc. But the defense should be better without Trae. Now, without Onyeka being out actually hurts defense, but in theory, their current personnel, which, more Kobe Buffkin, less, obviously, no Trae, they should be a little bit better defensively. But in this game, they weren't great defensively, and I am extremely skeptical to the point where I'm very confident that it's not the case, that they'll be able to make up the offensive drop with the defensive improvement. And that's been the case the last 2 games. So there we are. But anyway, as far as this game's concerned, offensively in the second half, it was about as rough as it possibly gets. 40 points was charitable. They were really kind of on the way to like 36 or something before the absolute garbage time kicked in. And it was pretty rough, let's just say. Quickly, defensively in this one, I said that for last on this first segment because it wasn't awful. The Nets did shoot the ball very well from 3. They were 47% from 3 in this game. They only made 15 threes. I think it was a little bit overstated. On Thursday, the Nets won the game because they made all their threes. That was the number 1 reason. I said that on the show post-game. They made 22 threes on Thursday. That was a barrage. Today, they made a bunch of shots, but they averaged 14 threes a game, and they made 15 threes. So it wasn't like it was a crazy number of volume. Now, the second quarter, as we'll talk about later on in the podcast, was wild. They were 8 for 8 from 3 in the second quarter, and that certainly helped to swing this game in Brooklyn's favor. But I would just note that even after that, the Hawks were winning at halftime. So it wasn't like they won the game in that stretch. The Hawks did hold them under 50% from 2-point range in this game. That's been a theme I talked about the last 3 days, basically, is that Brooklyn is not good inside the arc. So the Hawks just had to not let them beat them from 3. And in both games, they kind of let them beat them from 3 in some ways. They didn't force turnovers either. Only 11 giveaways for Brooklyn in this game against 28 assists. And the other big thing is that Mikal Bridges, who is a really good player, I don't believe is a number 1 option on a good team, but he's been killing the Hawks all year long. He's had 1 shaky game against Atlanta. That was Thursday's game, actually. But coming into the night, he averaged 31 points a game in the first 3 games against the Hawks. And today, he had 38 points on 28 shooting possessions. The Hawks couldn't keep him out of the middle the entire game. It was they didn't really seem to bother him whatsoever in this game. I mean, Hunter was ineffective on him, as was Bay. Johnson had a couple of better reps, but nothing fantastic there either. They had no answers for Mikal Bridges in this game. On Thursday, it was Cam Johnson, who was also pretty good in this one, but tonight it was, sorry, I keep saying tonight, this afternoon, it was Mikal Bridges. And, all things considered, though, the whole starting lineup for Brooklyn was +7 or better, and they were just kind of equal opportunity, able to kind of beat up on the Hawks defense. So, some regression on defense the last couple of games after the super hot start post Trey, and then offensively, it's been a tale of halves and quarters at times. They've had a few good quarters, few good halves on offense in the last 4 games, but not enough on the whole. Just by the way, just as a reminder, as I don't think I said it earlier, the Hawks were actually small underdogs to even favorites at times again in the betting market in this game. So they were 1.5 point underdogs according to our friends at FanDuel on Thursday. Today it kind of kept going back and forth. They were 1 point favorites. They were 1 point underdogs. Essentially a coin flip game. And to lose both of these games, like I'll own it. Like I said on the show before Thursday's game, like the most common, most projectable, average statistical result would have been in 1-1 against the Nets in these 2 games. I would have thought that 0-2 was the least likely scenario, to be honest with you. But that's what happened, and the Hawks have to live with that and sort of deal with the consequences of kind of not necessarily blowing the lead, but they're now not in a dead heat, but close to it with the Nets with 22 games remaining. All right, we'll have more on this game, obviously, coming up in a second with regard to how it unfolded, nuts and bolts style, first quarter, second quarter, etc. And at the end of the podcast, we'll talk about the players and how they all performed. And spoiler alert, it was not great for most guys in this game. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and you can get buckets right now with your first bet at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And at the moment, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets. So any winning $5 bets at FanDuel, that's $150 in your pocket if your bet wins. Bet all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app is also really easy to use. They have everything you're looking for across the sports betting space: over-unders, money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. And the app is safe, it's secure, and they cover the whole range of sports as well. That, of course, includes the NBA and college basketball. They have the NFL when it's in season, college football, MLB, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and much more. And they also have all the Hawks angles that you're looking for, including a full slate of offers on each and every game, plus futures and much more. And now is an awesome time to sign up with folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and shoot your shot at FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we'll dive in now to how this one unfolded. And in contrast to the game on Thursday, where the Hawks had an awful start, they were down 18-4 out of the outset on Thursday. Tonight, they were actually up 16-7 against the Nets coming out of the gate. 7-2 early on, forced early timeout. They scored on four possessions in a row. I thought Murray was really good at the outset of this game. Capella missed a hook early on and a shot that he usually needs to make, but he did actually what he doesn't do often enough for anyone's liking, including my own, is that he had a couple nice kick-out passes on offensive rebounds in this game. That was nice to see from him. Also drew his 12th charge of the year. Capella is number 9 in the NBA in charges drawn, despite missing time and not playing that many minutes compared to a lot of guys. So that's a strength of his. I thought there were 2 bad challenges in this game, both in the first half by each team. Kevin Ollie of the Nets had a terrible one, I thought, didn't make any sense at all. A nice gift for the Hawks. Then Quinn had one that was kind of a no-hoper as well later on. Rotationally, it was pretty much exactly the same as it's been since Trey went down. It was Hunter as the 6th man, clearly, and then some combination of Garrison Matthews, Bruno as the backup center, and then Kobe Buffkin in the backup point guard role. The only guy who was active didn't play at all was Wes Matthews. Trent Forrest played 2 minutes of garbage time, but essentially it was kind of what it's been as far as rotation is concerned. Buffkin played a couple minutes with DeJounte, I believe, maybe 1 in this game, not much more than that, and a little bit of small ball, but kind of similar to what it's been. The Hawks were up by as many as 13 points in the first quarter. Brooklyn did score the final 6 points of the first quarter to cut the lead down to 7. The Hawks didn't score for about 2 minutes, and that was kind of a precursor of what was to come. Still a good quarter, though. Murray had 6 assists, 4 threes combined for Bogey and Hunter at the outset, and the Nets were really cold shooting-wise. They made 7 threes in the first quarter on Thursday. Tonight, they made 7 field goals in the first quarter. But from that point forward, the Hawks didn't really get stops. I didn't pull the numbers, but if you remove the first quarter from the defensive numbers, the last 3 were pretty rough on that end of the floor. I thought Bufkin had a couple nice flashes in the first half, a good drive to draw a foul in the beginning of the part of the second quarter, I should say. Had a good read and a good passing delivery on a feed to Sadiq Bey for a dunk. But the offense did sputter a little bit. Bey had his best stretch of the night in the middle of the second quarter. He actually scored 10 straight points for the Hawks at one stage in this one. But the Nets had a nice run mid-quarter. They played Jalen a little bit at center in the first half. It was more often in the second half because I think Capella's pretty good in the first half. But the Hawks were only up by 2 at the break, which I thought was a missed opportunity. They should have been up by more than that with how they played on offense. They had 5 guys with 9 points or more in the first half. Murray had 10 assists. That actually tied his career high for assists in a half. Spoiler alert, he only had 11 in the game. So you could tell the second half was not quite the same there. But I even had this in my notes now. It was tough for the Hawks to only be up by 2 because it was a really, really good offensive half. It wasn't like insane, but given the available roster, like to play that way on offense in a half and be only up by 2, I would say it was probably the best or second best half of offense since Trey went down. There was one half against Utah that was similar in as far as the effectiveness was concerned, but that obviously gave way. And Brooklyn in the first half, here's a crazy stat for you. The Nets shot 55% from 3 in the first half and 38% from 2 in the first half. Those numbers came closer together by the end of the game, but it was truly a 3-point only attack for Brooklyn before halftime. The game started to swing away from the Hawks in the third quarter. A 15-4 run by Brooklyn to open the third quarter put the Hawks down by 9 after they'd been up by 13 in the first half. The offense came to an absolute screeching halt in the second half, which I've sort of alluded to multiple times, but just some more numbers here. They opened 1 of 11 from the floor in the second half. They had 2 points at about 5 minutes. There was a big shot by DeJounte. It felt like it was going to be sort of a stabilizing factor. He had a big 3 to get them sort of back in touch. And then immediately they allowed a 4-point play to Cam Johnson. So they were down by 10 again. They were kind of in that range the whole rest of the way in the third quarter. Jalen had a brutal turnover that led to a run-out layup by Mikal Bridges, and they were down by 10 at the end of the third quarter. So again, up 13 early, up 7 in the first quarter, up 2 at halftime, and then down by 10 at the end of the third. They were 6 of 24 from the field, including 2 of 11 from Murray and Bogey in the third, and they had 18 points. Woof. In the fourth, at the outset, I thought both offenses were really bad in the fourth quarter. In fact, they scored combined, the Hawks and the Nets, 4 points at about 3.5, 4 minutes. Turnovers, missed shots, like just really kind of ugly basketball. I will say the bench unit for the Hawks, which was in the game at that point in time with Kobe and Bruno, etc., they played pretty aggressive and competent defense in that stretch, but the offense just was not enough to kind of take advantage of that. Here's a money stat for you. I mentioned how bad the offense was in the whole second half, but here's where it actually was off the rails. They scored 21 points in the first 16 and a half minutes of the second half. So that is about almost a quarter and a half, 21 points. They were 7 of 31 from the field with 6 turnovers in that stretch. And that's where they lost the game. I mean, it's pretty clear to see on the stat sheet. If you watch this game, this kind of was obvious, but the offense essentially was bottom of the barrel for a quarter and a half, and that's why they lost. There you go. The game was still, though, in doubt. The Hawks were within 10-ish mid-fourth quarter, and then the Nets had a 7-0 run to essentially end the game. The Hawks actually went small to their offensive lineup. I mean, the one lineup that I've argued, and I still would argue, that is their best offensive group right now without Trey, is DeJounte, Bogey, Hunter, Bey, and Johnson at the 5. They did that. Quinn seems to like, as most coaches do, to be honest with you, to go small when you're losing in the fourth quarter because it's kind of higher variance. Your offense can kind of come back. He did that. Down 10. They went to Jalen earlier at center than they had in the first half. But as soon as they did that, they actually had 3 empty trips in a row. Bogey had 2 turnovers. Bogey was awful in this game, by the way. And then DeJounte got a technical foul during this as well. So it ended up being an 8-0 run by the Nets to go from the Hawks down 10 to the Hawks down 18. Obviously, they were scuffling, the technical foul, all that stuff. And then by the time that actually was happening, they're down 18 with 4 minutes to go, and the game is just over. Like, it was essentially just in the blink of an eye. It was already going to be an uphill battle, down 10-ish with 6 to 7 minutes to go. But they were in the game, and then very quickly they were not in the game anymore. And then within a minute after that, they give it one more push, did Quinn with the rotation. And then as soon as that was over, it was the white flag, it was Trent Forrest, and it was the bench unit, and all she wrote. So the Hawks again had 32 points with like 2 minutes left. In the second half with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it really was the perfect storm of bad process and bad results. First half, better process and really good results with some shot making, especially by guys like Murray and Bey who were kind of hot. Hunter made some threes in the first half. Second half, essentially no one shot the ball well, and the process also kind of took a nosedive. So we'll leave it there for now. We'll talk about the players and stuff in a second. It'll allow me to get a little bit deeper on some of the more troubling trends. But they're playing slower without Trey. They're not creating threes without Trey. The number of 3-pointers per game is way down, like 8 or 9 per game. Lower corner threes, as I mentioned a lot on Thursday, are way down. And obviously Trey is one of the best passers in the world, but even beyond that, they're just not playing as quick, which they could still do. Clearly, there's an impact there without their best player, but they still could be playing more optimally with their current groups, playing faster, creating more threes, breaking the paint. That's something Quinn emphasized a lot on Thursday, and I think again today, post game, is that they have to be able to get into the lane to create the rotations and then kick out, all that stuff. It's just not happening on tape. Like it's an unsightly brand of offense, and we'll leave it there for now. But I have plenty of thoughts on that topic, but we'll hold them for later. All right, we'll have more on this game coming up on the player side. But first, a word from our partners on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and they have Demons and Goblins, and they are the newest, most exciting ways to play at Prize Picks. And there are squares marked with red demons or green goblins that give you different payouts at Prize Picks. And also, you can now do 100 times the money on your entries, which is as little as 4 correct picks. You have $10, you can turn that into $1,000 at Prize Picks. If you want to play alongside some Prize Picks favorite players like Rapper Meat Mill, it can be Andrew Schultz as well. Find them under Community Plays, under the Promos tab of the app, to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every week. They have injury insurance as well at Prize Picks, so your entries can stay in play even if one of your players happens to get injured. It's really simple to play there. I can make my picks and spin an entry in just 60 seconds or less. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've been playing there for quite some time now, months and months and months. I really enjoy diving in to all the numbers each and every day at PrizePicks. And the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA when you get there for a first-time deposit match up to $100. One more time, that is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. All right, and to the player-by-player breakdowns at the end of the show here. Not a lot of great performances, as you might expect, in a double-digit road loss to a middling basketball team in the Nets. I thought Bufkin was pretty okay. Offensively, he's not been dominant. He had 3 points on 5 shots. Did have 3 assists, 2 turnovers, a couple nice flashes, a couple of really good passes. I thought he's operating the ball well. It's still clear that he's a rookie point guard. I think that defensively he has been largely as good as advertised. As far as I think there's been a little bit of a reaction to how good he is now, but he's obviously very good compared to what the Hawks have been having at that spot. But offensively, it's a reminder that he was drafted as a combo guard in some ways. He's been playing point guard in College Park. He's operating fine, but he isn't super dynamic right now, which is, by the way, not a criticism. I like Kobe a lot. I think there's upside on that end of the floor. It's just that it takes time. He's 20 years old, and don't overreact to that end of the floor. Garrison Matthews has been a little bit shaky recently. Didn't score in this game. Only took 1 shot. I said this before. Garrison's got to shoot more if he's going to play 13 minutes. 13 minutes, 1 shot for Garrison Matthews. He does little things. He does. He gets in the way. He tries to draw charges. He's kind of an irritant defensively. But in the end, his primary value on the offensive end is his shooting, where he is a really good shooter. But 1 shot attempt in 13 minutes is not going to be enough for him to return a ton of value, I wouldn't think. Bruno was okay in this game. 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 blocks. I thought he gave them good energy. Still makes some mistakes. That's something. It's kind of one of the hallmarks of Bruno, is that he does give you a lot with the way he just plays with physicality and burst as a backup center. But he's a little bit overeager at times. But still, I thought he was on the higher end of the way that guys played in this game according to their baselines. Bruno, if anything, was average or better, and that was obviously all they needed from him. Hunter had a weird night. He hit 4 threes. He was the only guy on the team that shot the ball what I would describe as well from 3-point range in this game, but only 1 of 5 on 2s, missed a free throw, 15 points, 2 rebounds, 2 turnovers. Defensively, he was not very impactful against Bridges at all in this game. So they needed the shooting, and when they were rolling in the first half offensively, part of that was that Hunter was making some shots, but it was not his best effort. I think he's been better recently than he was in this game. To the starters in this one, Jalen Johnson had a weirdly quiet and not particularly good basketball game. He had 7 points on 12 shots. He was 0 of 4 from 3, 3 of 8 from 2, 1-2 at the free throw line. Did have 9 rebounds, only 1 assist. Jalen has been clearly impacted with the role that they're having him play. I would like to have him play a little bit more on the ball right now, but like the setups are not quite as easy for anybody. It's not just a Jalen thing, but they're not using him the way that I'd like to see him used right now. And it's tough because everybody's kind of cramped with their current rotations and all that stuff. But he played 35 minutes, like he played his normal workload, just didn't have a huge impact on offense in this game. And I think that's partly the way he played and partly the way that he has been used in the recent spell of games. Bogey was awful, I gotta say. 13 points, yes, but on 13 shot attempts, he was 1 of 5 on twos, 4 turnovers, including 2 or 3 that were just awful passes. Minus 15, defensively not very good. I'm a huge Bogey advocate. I think he's really good, generally speaking. This was one of his worst games of the year. He's had some shooting games that were similar to this. Even Thursday, he didn't shoot the ball very well, but he didn't play well at all in this game. Like the decision making was not good. He and DeJounte are not partnering super well together right now in the backcourt. It's kind of like your turn, my turn stuff. Bogey was a little bit too, I don't want to use the word selfish, but like certainly too shot happy. Like I like when Bogey is shot happy, but I want him to be hunting better shots. Like he was more like on ball shot happy in this game, which I want him to be coming off screens, all that stuff. So he'll have better nights for sure, but he was not good. One interesting note actually on Bogey, because he's not shooting the ball right now, that's very well, is that he's apparently battling a right thumb issue of some kind. That's of course his shooting hand. That's important. Not listed on the injury report, but it was referenced on the broadcast a few times by Bob Rathbun, who travels with the team. I'm sure he knows. Also, Lauren Williams of the AJC and Jamila Johnson, who were in Brooklyn for the game, noted this as well. So apparently it's like known to some level that Bogey has been dealing with something on his right hand / right thumb. But, you know, how bad that is, we'll see. But he's not been shooting the ball well recently. Just want to note that because it was out there during the game today. Capella was okay. 11 points, 10 rebounds. Still didn't like, he's not looking like quite his full-fledged self right now, but I thought he gave them some good production on the whole. Still, like, he's not moving in space the same way he has in the past, even this year, especially not 2 or 3 years ago, but even earlier this year when he was a little bit healthier. But I thought he gave them okay production. He only, 4 of 7 from the floor is fine for him. Missed 1 free throw out of 4, that's fine for him as well. 10 rebounds in 24 minutes. Like, he did his job. He wasn't awesome, but he was not the problem, I didn't think, in this game. Sadiq Bey had the one stretch in the first half when he was really good with 10 straight points, at 23 points. He was one of the only offensive players in this game that actually had anything going. Not like his absolute best work, but he was one of their better guys for sure. Not super efficient, but still shot the ball better in this game than he did on Thursday and gave them pretty good production. And then DeJounte Murray had a weird game. So first, congrats to DeJounte, who clinched himself an extra $500,000 by reaching his performance incentive for three-pointers made in a season. It was actually a quote-unquote likely incentive because he actually got there last year as well, but it's still $500,000 in your pocket. Nothing to sneeze at there for DeJounte, so congrats to him on that. I mentioned before he had the 10 assists in the first half, 11 in the game. He was not efficient as a scorer either. He was 20 points on 21 shooting possessions, so below average efficiency there. Had some nice passes in the first half, he did. He played with very, very little physicality and force after about the first quarter and a half in this game. He had some nice finishes late in the game as well, but like not his best work, not anybody's best work. Maybe you could say Sadiq and Bruno was pretty good, but like no one played well in this game. Like Murray had a double-double, yes, but the passing was good in the first half for him. Second half, he was part of the same problem everybody else had. They were bad on offense. He didn't have the same juice, and we'll leave it there for now. But truly not the most encouraging performance in the world from this Hawks team. And unfortunately, it gets a little bit more difficult on the offensive end of the floor schedule-wise coming up. Now, it's the NBA. Every game is separate, and you can have a good game against a bad team or a good game against a good team, etc. But the next 4 games, the Hawks play good defenses in all 4 of them. They play at the Knicks, good defense on Tuesday. They play the Cavs on a back-to-back. The Cavs are really good defensively. They play at Memphis next Friday. Memphis is good as well, as much as they're not very good overall. It's because their offense is not good. They're good defensively. And then New Orleans a week from tomorrow on Sunday. So the next 4 teams, I think, are all in the top 10 defensively. Could be a little bit of a challenge. Or on the bright side, if you want to be an optimist, maybe they score well against these teams and you kind of assuage some of that doubt that they currently have on offense. Defensively, I will say it's a little bit easier in some respects. The Knicks are pretty good on offense this year, but the Cavs, hit and miss. Memphis is bad on offense. So we'll see, but the schedule certainly doesn't get any easier because, these first 4 games without Trey, and really the first 5 games post All-Star break have all been favorable-ish games. Like they had 3 games in a row at home to begin the second half of the season in which they were favored in all 3. They only won 2 of them, but they were favored in all 3. And these 2 games in Brooklyn, yes, they're on the road, but they're against a not very good team, and they were like coin flips in those games. they're going to be a real underdog on Tuesday in New York. Doesn't mean they can't win, but they will be. Cleveland on a back-to-back, probably underdogs there too. At Memphis, TBD. New Orleans, probably underdogs there without Trey. So the schedule is getting more difficult. We will see. And then, by the way, after that, they have the long road trip to the West Coast. So hold on tight for that. I mentioned a second ago, but they do play. They have this bizarre 6-game stretch. I've asked around again to people around the team. I can't find anybody that believes this is like not the longest stretch they've ever had. I'm not qualified to do a full search on this, but I think this is the longest they've ever been in a single city, non-playoffs, since I've been covering the team, besides Atlanta. It's crazy. But they're still in New York, and they don't play again until Tuesday. So they should have at least one full practice, maybe even two practices between now and then. But it's Tuesday at the Knicks. That at one point was supposed to be a national TV game. It's no longer a national TV game, but Bowie's going to have that game locally, so that'll be available for you to watch. And a nice little test there for Atlanta, to say the least. The Knicks are not super healthy right now, and they're not playing incredibly well, and they're also coming back. They actually play on Sunday on the road, so the Hawks actually will have, as crazy as it is, they might actually have the situational advantage despite the fact that they've been on the road this whole time. The Knicks, though, I'm looking at it now as I'm recording the podcast, they're only 3-8 in their last 11. So they're banged up right now, so not their best bet, but they are pretty good this year. They're like, top 4 or 5 in the East, and interesting challenge. So anyway, I'll have a podcast probably between now and then. That's the plan anyway, so knock on wood for that. But I'll just say this. You can please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube on the video side. If you missed it, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but if you are an audio-only subscriber, you will also see the postcast on a regular basis from the folks at Locked On Sports Atlanta. They have their own YouTube channel, but they also share my audio feed at Locked On Hawks. So just some extra bonus content, nothing less from me. I'm still doing 5 or 6 shows per week on my own, but then you throw in a little bit of extra content if you enjoy that. So check that podcast out anywhere you get your podcast as well. And ratings, reviews appreciated. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Follow my written work around the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Hopefully, if you are a Hawks fan, there'll be a little bit better vibes coming out of these 2 games. And there is room for the debate. I probably will have it at some point with someone on the podcast about I know, and trust me, every time I talk about the Hawks competing for the play-in right now, I get the who cares responses. I don't blame you for that. There's one camp that's like, all right, give me to the lottery. And there's one camp that's like, all right, give me to the playoffs. I'm not telling you how to feel. They're kind of in this in-between zone, so I'm going to cover both angles in the next couple of weeks and months. But right now, they are still the 10 seed. They're in the play-in if the season ends today. And I bet you, even after this loss, the projection models will have the Hawks as the favorite to make the play-in. Now, it's hard without Trey. The Nets, though, are not particularly awesome, even though they just beat the Hawks twice in a row. So hold on tight. We'll have full coverage each and every day on this podcast. Check it out. Subscribe to the show, and we'll see you all next time.